Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Garrett.
Yes, so according
Phil,
to Indiana law,
Pull the microphone down so we can.
according to Indiana law and the commission's electronic meeting statute, we need 3 commissioners in person to hold an official meeting. Because we only have 2 commissioners in person today and the remaining online, the commission can receive information. It cannot take any official action or votes on any items. It's not considered a meeting of the Redevelopment Commission, but we can receive information and presentations.
Okay. So for today, we will pass on the approval of minutes from the September 13th meeting and defer that to our next meeting. Bill, on the economic development area updates.
Yeah, so we're working through updating the way that Chris has done his budget reports. So there's not a September budget report in the packet. We have paid bills, though. I will let you know that. Paid lots of bills. But we will have a September and an October report at the next meeting. So that will be included in the packet. Skipping down to the professional services agreement, again, we can't take action on these things, but at our last meeting, the Redevelopment Commission approved a resolution in support of a staff services agreement. In the packet today, item 3A21 is a Redevelopment Commission administrative services agreement. This would provide funding back to the county into the general fund in the amount of $135,000 annually to cover the salaries or portion of the services provided by my position and the other economic development planner position. This is something that the council and others as part of the budget this year have asked that we put together. So that's what this agreement would do. We'll, again, seek to get that approved at a future meeting. The next item on the agreement, or next item on the agenda is a redevelopment district financing proposal from Barnes and Thornburg. As part of the work the county is now doing, the county is splitting bond work between a couple of different parties. The Redevelopment Commission would continue to use Barnes and Thornburg for its legal services as it relates to bonds and bonding. And so this is a service proposal for Barnes and Thornburg. Again, this would be heard at a future meeting also. If there's any questions on either of those items, I'd be happy to answer them.
It does not appear so.
Okay. So under New Carlisle Economic Development Area, again, a couple of items. The first is a professional service agreement, Addendum 2, with Lockmuller Group. Back a couple of years ago, we had a contract with Lockmuller to study a roadway corridor north and south through the IEC. As part of the work that we're doing in anticipation of the Altium Cells project, we need to get some additional field survey work done for future water, sewer, fiber work, and roadway work that needs to be done in the corridor. In the packet is a map that shows the work. It would be specific to Fillmore Road from Walnut to just east of the intersection of Larison Drive, and then from Larison just south of Fillmore up to Edison, and a little bit of work on Edison. This work would be a change of their existing contract because we didn't go all the way through a Pell document process. There's funds in the contract, so what it would do is just rearrange the funding in the proposal. But what we need to do is amend the proposal to allow this to happen. So again, this is work that will be used by multiple vendors as we go forward with design once we get the nod that that project is going to move ahead. So. Also, under New Carlisle Economic Development Area is the monthly report from Cogent Development, or Cogent Industrial Partners, I'm sorry. That Cogent report is in your packet. And, you know, again, just the monthly report, we don't vote on that, we just accept it. So, as a matter for the record. AM General Economic Development Area, wanted to give a couple of updates, and then again, there's a professional service agreement in this packet. So we had gone out to bid on 2 segments of the Capitol Avenue Trail Project, the Riviera Lincolnway Project, which is west of Capitol Avenue on Lincolnway East, so west and east. So Lincolnway East in Mishawaka, along Riviera Drive, and then west of Brook Avenue. And then we also had a segment on McKinley from Capitol to just west of Current. Both of those projects came in. We had 2 bidders. The numbers were higher than the engineer's estimate. And based on timing of the project, we could probably have gotten the McKinley project done, probably got it done before winter really set in, but there were some additional costs based on, as we were approaching late October, November, that made the numbers maybe a little higher than they should be. The work on the Capitol Avenue, or the Lincolnway project, was gonna be complicated because the state's gonna come in and do a major improvement on Capitol Avenue from just north of the bridge to south all the way to the bypass, so they're gonna be resurfacing and doing a bunch of work. So had we put in the improvements, the state likely would have taken a lot of those improvements out. So there was no reason to do the work twice in a very short span of time in a very short, small project area. So we're gonna actually, what we're seeking to do is to reject both bids with the Board of Commissioners. So that'll go next meeting to the Board of Commissioners. We'll rebid this project, these 2 projects, and then add in Dragoon Trail, which we'll talk about here in a minute, and then add in another project on Capitol. All of those will be coordinated. We have money in the budget, and so by rolling these projects over into next year, it'll guarantee us enough funds. We also think that next year, hopefully, we'll be able to find Portland cement. Right now, that Portland cement is at a premium, so cement is more costly than it has been in a while. We also anticipate more bidders, because a lot of bidders have been tied up in the downtown Mishawaka project and some other projects. So while we had 2 very qualified bidders, we're hoping that a rebid in February will give us more of a pool of workers or companies to bid on the project. So that's that project. And then we also did a contract a couple of meetings ago to do a hazard elimination and mobility study in the Ash Road and Lincolnway corridor in Osceola, looking at train crossings and rail crossings and road improvements, things like that. I just wanted to report back that we have some preliminary concepts that have been prepared. We've got a meeting later this week with NDOT and the railroad and MACOG to start looking at those concepts. Then we'll have separate meetings with the parks and county leaders and Osceola leaders and some others to start working through those concepts. So just wanted to let you know that that project is moving ahead, and we will share a preliminary draft of that report here probably at the next meeting. So
Bill,
those are
one
both
of the railroad crossings that they were concerned about staying open has been closed permanently.
That's correct. Chestnut Street has been closed. The town had been working with the railroad already to do that. And so what actually works out well, the study works out from a timing perspective, because that's been closed, and now all of a sudden there's this new set of traffic patterns that are beginning to develop, and some of those work out really well, some of them don't. So it's an opportunity to work with the town to look at some of those patterns to figure out what else may need to be done. So rarely in the middle of a study do you actually come in and close one of the crossings and say, okay, now let's kind of examine. But from a timing standpoint, it worked out well. It's one less crossing that has to be dealt with, so. The last thing under AM General area is a professional service agreement for a segment of trail along Dragoon Trail from Capitol West to the Mishawaka city limits. We had brought this before you in a preliminary engineering capacity. And as part of the work that we were doing, we partnered or are partnering with Mishawaka to have this segment be part of their match for the READY grant that they received for George Wilson Park. So as the city has applied for a READY grant for George Wilson Park to make winter and four-season improvements at George Wilson, they have to provide a number of match elements to that amount. So this segment is actually, will be considered part of that by providing more mobility from the Capitol Avenue Trail and the neighborhoods into the park. As kind of a side timing benefit, Leidig Systems, who's located on Dragoon, is extending water and sewer. And so what we will do is design our improvements in coordination with their design team so that after they've torn everything up, we can come back in and put the sidewalk in on top of the trail system or on top of the utility corridor. So they would do all the tear out side of things, and we would do all the restoration side of things as part of the project. So it actually likely will lower our costs as part of the work, because the site will be regraded in and everything can be done at one time. So that would be a 2023 project as they extend water and sewer. So it really is a huge opportunity for a win there for them and for that area and for the project. So those are the updates in the general area. Again, any questions, I'd be happy to answer them from anybody.
I do have one question. As far as you talked about the state coming in and doing projects as well, how far in advance are those approved, and who do they communicate that with, so that we don't have an issue where we do something, they come in and turn it out, tear it up, and then we're wasting taxpayer dollars
Right.
with because of lack of communication on their part?
So generally, their projects are usually fairly well regimented and laid out as far as when they're gonna happen, things like that. There's some reasons that elements of this project, or of their corridor project got moved ahead. And specifically at the intersection of the resurfacing and some of the work they're gonna do, really as a result of the Dunkin' Donut project on the east side of the street and some other resurfacing that needs to be done over there, and just some other work that has to be done at that intersection, accelerated that piece of the work. And so as part of doing that, we knew that project was happening, but the extent and the breadth of the project, if you will, changed a little bit over the course of their design. And so, again, we're able to benefit in a couple of cases because we won't have to do resurfacing in some cases. Striping will all be done by the state instead of our project. So there's a lot of benefits to us waiting on the project. And again, it's one of those from a government standpoint, when we can work together, it saves resources and it ends up being a better project, so. So there's no updates on Wyatt Economic Development Area, Northwest Cleveland, and now our newest Solar Project Economic Development Area. That's now Section F. And then, so what I'd like to do is turn the meeting over to DLZ to do a presentation on the county highway garage project. And as they will talk about this project, one of the things in particular is we look at our 2023 budget. There will be an ask for us to consider helping to fund one of the highway garages, and Stephen will talk about that. But we wanted to get this in front of you sooner rather than later, so as we start to put together our budget for next year, we have this information, so. Is that slide one? You guys are gonna need to point, the pointer doesn't work for a PDF, so when you want it to advance. Okay.
Hi, Sky Metters, County Engineer. Office is Infrastructure Planning Growth. Office is on the 7th and 11th floor. This building, I'm going to turn it over to DLZ and Stephen and DLZ here real quick, but and he'll get into the nuts and bolts of this. But what this is it's what has stemmed from a lot of effort and study and so forth over the past several years in trying to determine some of the best and efficient ways to manage our highway operations, given staff and funding and so forth. Like I said, I'll turn it over to Stephen and he can get into the details. Thank you.
Good morning. Stephen Krimkowski, Principal Architect at DLZ. Offices at 2211 East Jefferson, South Bend. I also have with me Ashley Riley and Brian Smith, who can answer any specific questions as well. But as a brief overview, as Sky mentioned, we've been working on the highway garage improvement project for some time now, and I'll just let you know when I need to go to the next slide. Okay. Okay, so just as a recap, there's 6 existing facilities. 3 are currently in use. 1 is mainly used for equipment and storage, and then 1 of those locations is scheduled to be decommissioned and demolished. And so these facilities are 47 years old. There needs to be capital improvements done to them just to maintain them, and so no further deterioration occurs. So this really came down to why are we doing this project as a whole? It's really to improve the overall level of service for the overall community. There's also some development areas and coverage areas that have shifted because of new developments that have happened within the county. And then also there's just ongoing costs. We're also trying to improve operational cost as well and reduce overall risk. So next one. So you probably have heard in the past, we started this project back in 2017. There was an focus study that was developed. And so the plan was really to develop, the last round was really to develop 2 primary garages. And with that, it just became, it had some challenges just from an operational standpoint, but also fiscally it had some challenges. So we hit the reboot button and we looked at, you have existing facilities that are quality assets that you have in the county. Why don't we look at reusing those and repurpose, or and improving those and maintaining that operation? So the next one. So with that, we first, the heightened area and time frame is really during the winter and snow coverage and the snow plow coverage. So we really need to look at that. One of the things that we realized is that you only have 55 drivers. Back in 2000, when the last study was done, you had about 80. And then also the lane mileage increased over those, since the 2000 study that was done. And so we went back and looked at the snowplow coverage of the overall county and tried to see what made the most sense from an operational standpoint. The next one. And so we realized in that the northeast quadrant, there was more subdivisions that were generated, there was more time. There was also more complaints in that area than in any other area. And so we began to look at how are we going to improve this overall. And so we'll go back and go to the next one that just identifies and documents the fact that most of the complaints were in that northeast region of the county. Okay, and so when we began, we decided that what made sense is we really needed to create a new facility in that northeast region and then utilize the current facilities of Woodland, North Liberty, and New Carlisle. And what that did was that it actually reduced the amount of time and improved the overall coverage for the county and the level of service to the community. Let's go ahead. Almost 3 times as much that you had before. So when we looked at various boundaries and so forth, and we realized this New Carlisle facility was a valuable asset that can provide the necessary service for that northwest region of the county. And so let's try to capitalize on that. Let's go ahead. And so by doing that and creating this new northeast area or northeast region, we basically balanced out the coverage. So it's sort of a win-win for all areas of the county. And with this, it reinstated the coverage at New Carlisle as well, and for the patrons and the community out there. Go ahead. So we came up with an overall plan. It's a 5-step plan, and with that, we wanted to utilize those existing buildings. And as Bill mentioned, the New Carlisle facility, there is capital improvements that need to occur along with Woodland and North Liberty as well. And then just for your general knowledge, we're looking at creating a new fueling facility as well as salt storage for the vehicles in the northeast area. The Granger facility has been slated to be decommissioned for some time, and so that can move forward. It really can't move forward until that new salt storage and fueling area in the northeast is established. And then we'd eventually create a new northeast satellite garage, and then also the Portage Manor site is still under development on a much smaller, reduced scale than it was at one point. So let's go ahead. We're going to keep on going down, I think. Yep. So what are some of the improvements that we need to happen at these existing facilities? We're talking about Woodland, North Liberty, and of course New Carlisle. It's primarily capital improvements that you would need to do regardless, just to maintain those facilities. So door replacement, roof replacement, new heating and electrical systems, lighting for energy efficiency, vehicle exhaust, and then, of course, if you're taking out most of that interiors of the mechanical and electrical, you need to provide new finishes as well by taking down the ceilings and so forth. So each garage, including the New Carlisle, would be about $1.8 million. for capital improvements. And that 3 garages is the 5.4. So looking at it, we'll go to the next one. So with that, we would begin about an 8-month process to do those capital improvements for the design, bidding, another couple months, construction, another 12 months. These are preliminary right now. So we're looking at probably 2014 for those improvements to take place. Go to the next one. And then that 1.8 is the new Carlisle specifically that Bill alluded to. And so you can see overall from the sequencing of the time frame, but also of the dollars that are available, we're in the midst of refining that and financing and so forth. So I think that's, yeah. And then if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer anything. A lot of information to digest, but from a nutshell, from a new Carlisle standpoint, in that garage, it needs some capital improvements. Whether the garage moves forward with all the other implementation plan or not, you have to provide that to maintain that level of service out there. So.
More for Bill. When we consider this opportunity to improve the garage, I would imagine we also have to consider like the wastewater treatment plant and other needs in the new Carlisle area. And without having any information, that would seem to take precedence. So we probably would have to have an idea of what the plan is for the next number of years
Right.
before we could commit, and what our cash flows and all that is. Because I know there's other projects that are also, vitally important to the community.
Yeah, so a couple of things. This project, or the highway garage does sit within the new Carlisle Economic Development Area. So it is within, so it's not, it also serves, but it's in. We've checked that a couple of times. That question has come up. We will be looking at the budgets again for moving forward. There are some immediate costs if the Altium project moves forward that we'll have to cover. We've got to have $1 million, basically a project fund, if you will. That's part of the development agreement, and then we'll have some service contracts. The water treatment plant project, we've made commitments there from design and some construction, so we'll have to factor those in. We didn't do some of the work that we'd anticipated, so there's money that we have that could be reprogrammed. So that's one of the things that is, as we're pulling apart those budgets, we will be doing and trying to figure out where this phases in to that. Again, one of the other benefits, the Energy Center, is it is now in its 5th year, or will be in its 5th year of property tax payments. We continue to get more revenue off that, so there's some benefits there. So yeah, it's just a matter of really timing of this project more than anything else. So as some of the projects will be bonded out, we'll try to coordinate from a timing standpoint. Whether all of them are done at the same time or 2 are done first and the third kind of lags behind, we'll just have to work through that. So, but that it has been made apparent that this is a priority, and so this is something that we will be figuring out how it fits within the budget structure. So,
Will the South Shore project impact this a few years down the road? There's been some talk of having
of the station
stop.
project in town. I would tell you, I think, a couple different ways to answer that. One is probably based on the way there's federal funding available now. We'd probably seek match money for a station project if that was to move ahead. There are plans to move ahead. It didn't make the update list necessarily, but we do know that NICTD is pushing ahead with design on its relocation of the leg to the airport. So, the Redevelopment Commission, have been involved in those elements before. This will now be a NICTD-driven project, so we don't have costs that, we had money in the budget for this year for that project, so those can be reprogrammed. So I think the station in New Carlisle is gonna be kind of a separate conversation, knowing that there's the potential to relocate to the airport. I think it takes on a little bit more weight now than it has in the past, and especially if we get a couple of big users that come in that need to have people move to the area. So I think we've got to look at all those pieces and parts and just from a timing standpoint, figure out where we are in the timing of all those, so.
Hey, Bill,
Yes, Tom.
This question kind of ties into what we're talking about here. I think there's no question that it's time to make these capital expenditures. It's necessary. But what I always struggle with is that because it's a improvement to an existing facility, why does it even run through the redevelopment commission? Why isn't it just part of the normal course of business, the normal budgeting process for the county council? Because you would think improving existing county facilities is something that would fall outside of what we do in a redevelopment perspective.
Yeah, Tom, I think that's a great question and a fair question. And again, I think the purpose of today was to take this information, and then again, I think you 5 members need to make the decision on how or if we participate in the project, and if we do, when that happens. So I think that's a fair question.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
If nothing else on this, we do have one more brief update, and we got lucky because Brian Smith from DLZ happens to be in the room, and I told Brian I was gonna put him on the spot to give a brief update on the State Road 4 pedestrian and recreational trail study that DLZ is doing, so.
Brian Smith, project manager for DLZ. Interpreted Bill's comment as brief update as no PowerPoint. So we submitted a draft report to MACOG in late September. Currently, we've evaluated 3 potential routes to connect North Liberty, Potato Creek Park, and Lakeville. And for those 3 routes, we've identified potential construction cost as well as right-of-way cost. Our next steps from here would be to meet with MACOG, North Liberty, and Lakeville, get some input, make sure we've looked at everything that people wanted looked at. If anyone has any new ideas, then we can certainly look at those as well. And then we will proceed with finalizing the report probably in December, which will identify the preferred option as well as potential cost and right-of-way impacts. Anything else, Bill?
Nope, I think that's it.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you.
I have one last update. If you've been following the news, and I think there'll be more news about it later this week, the Electric Last Mile Solutions building is coming out of bankruptcy, or is working through the bankruptcy process. There's a group out of California, Mullen Automotive, that looks to be the only bidder for the site at $98 million. So we should, if everything moves forward as scheduled, by Thursday, I believe, there'll be a final sale of the site. We would anticipate a new user. We haven't had any conversations with the group, so we don't know how they intend to use it. This group is buying other electric vehicle assets across the country, buildings, IP, contracts, things like that. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of it. This would be the 3rd user for the site in the last 5 years. So we'll hope that maybe this one is a little bit more stable than the others. I would tell you right now, I think as of as of last night, stock was trading at 24 cents. If you wanna buy in now, you can buy in low, and maybe you'll be able to sell high. It is trading higher than the Elm stock, which is even lower than that. So we'll see where that goes. But I just would tell you, just over the course of the week, and as we get more information, we'll certainly share that. But we do have a connection to the site. We do own a piece of property that is under contract with SF Motors, who's the prior owner before Elms. So at some point, we would anticipate transferring some property, or would ideally sell the property so that we can get out from underneath property ownership at that site. So, but we'll keep you up to date as that transaction moves forward, so.
If this does go through, will it just require us entering into another lease agreement type of thing? What role will we have if this other entity does acquire those assets?
At this point in time, it would be just to transfer the lease and those responsibilities. Again, we haven't talked to the company, so we don't know if there's any larger issues as far as proposed abatements or anything like that, or any other utility upgrades or anything to the site. So we don't know anything additional beyond that. But for Electric Last Mile Solutions, the county didn't have any development agreement or anything with that group. We did with SF Motors before that. So it's kind of a wait and see at this point in time, but it's encouraging to see that the building could have a potential new use in it at that site. So it'll be interesting to see what its next step is.
With Elm in bankruptcy, how much, if any, lease payments and things have not been paid?
We're 100% current. So,
Right. Thank you.
yep.
Has anybody talked to Altium, or have they opined on this possible purchase from another company? Is that any direct competition to them in any way, or?
So this is a group that does, it looks, based on their portfolio, cars, and part of the reason we think that they are interested in the site is because then they can get into the Class 1 and Class 2 delivery vehicle market that Elms was in. One of the many pieces that this group owns is some battery technology. So there could be an opportunity for battery tech to be used. Maybe they would stay with their own battery technology. Maybe if somebody's making batteries in the same county, if that comes to pass, maybe there's an opportunity for that. So at this point in time, again, I think still pretty early in the game, so.
Any other comments or questions? All right. So we'll move to public comment, which we certainly can receive. As usual, please state your name, address, et cetera.
Real quick, Dennis, real quick before we do that, Bill, again, apologies for my email last night. Is there anything that is time sensitive that you would need us to meet before our next meeting?
At this point in time, no. On the agenda items today, no. The only thing that could become time sensitive is if the Altium does make a decision and we need to transfer option agreements. That could become time sensitive before the next meeting, but we'll know that, as soon as we know something one way or the other. That would be about the only time sensitive matter between now and November.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that question.
Before we go to public comment, can I ask another question this is really directed to Phil and members of the commission. I noticed in this packet, there are multiple professional service agreements in excess of $200,000. Several meetings ago, I raised the question of whether or not we should talk about having a level or a limit to where we can just automatically give professional service agreements to providers rather than going out for bid to make sure that our taxpayers are not being overcharged. And I know there was going to be some kind of study involved or looking at what kind of options there are. And just the number of professional service agreements in this packet brought that to the forefront in my mind. Where are we with that consideration?
Tom, I'll just start. We've started working backwards over a number of years, so we have a pretty good. I think we've got 4 years worth of data. I can clean that up this week and send that out so everybody can get a sense of the contracts that we've entered into over the last several years. I can get that out yet this week, assuming that we don't get some bombshell announcement today or tomorrow that ties up my time.
All right, thank you for that. But really, it's more of a policy question, in that, do we as a commission feel it's necessary at a certain level, not just to accept, quotes brought in from the usual suspects, and to go out and get multiple bids to make sure, just to keep everybody honest, not implying anybody's not being honest, but our fiduciary responsibility is to make sure that we don't pay for things at a rate higher than we need to.
Bill, I assume we'll look into that
Yeah.
and get back to Tom.
Yeah, I'll get that circulated, and
Okay.
you guys can use that as a discussion point.
Okay, so we'll add it to agenda item in the next couple meetings.
Yep.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Think we're
Dan
good.
Caruso, 305 Compton Street, New Carlisle. Thank you to the commission for asking the questions that occurred to me during this meeting this morning. But one question that I do have that didn't come up, and I don't know if anybody can answer this. The retooling, the abatement that was given to Unifracs out there, I don't think it's called Unifracs anymore, to retool a portion of their facility to produce a battery, an electric battery. Would this be seen as a competitor to Altium coming in, and is that figuring into their decision on whether to relocate here or not? Would that take away some of the impact of what they're doing here, being there'd be a competitor right next door? And I said, and I mentioned before, Bill, I think rather than a South Shore station, we need a Hampton Inn, New Carlisle, and we get people right there who are going to do business out in the IEC, who are going to walk into town and patronize the businesses in town. In that area where, down by the Legion, where the trailer park was, would be a perfect fit for a small Hampton Inn where we get people that are staying right there temporarily rather than having to drive in each day. Thank you.
Just real quick, I can address the tax, or the Unifracs, now Alcogen issue. So Alcogen is making a fibrous filament that will be used in lithium-ion batteries. It basically is, much like the Altium uses electrolytes, this would use this new fibrous material, so it really is different processes. But that's not to say that the Alcogen product couldn't end up in the Altium process at some point in time. But different processes, not necessarily competitors, different markets they serve, so.
Good morning. Thank you for your work today. Deborah Durrell, 21677 Otten Road, South Bend. I'd like to share with you today an open invitation to hear the special presentation of the Dialogue Project to the County Council at their next committee meeting, Tuesday, October 25th at 5:30 p.m. in this room. Rebecca Go, Director of St. Mary's College's Office for the Common Good, and Megan Zwart, PhD, Associate Professor and Chair of the Department of Philosophy and Director of the Dialogue Project at St. Mary's, will share about the college's efforts to promote productive dialogue, community engagement, and nonpartisan voter participation on campus. They will also share some ideas for the collaboration between the county and St. Mary's on these important issues. Also, on the topic of productive dialogue, I'd like to express my appreciation for and encourage participation for the comprehensive plan work being guided by Rundle Ernsberger Associates and the residents. I feel this is one of the most effective contributions we can make for the future, and everyone is doing an excellent job beyond our expectations, far beyond a formality. This is the real deal. Thank you.
Sky Metters, civil engineer. I live at 1550 Byron Drive, South Bend, Indiana. But thinking back to the comment and that was made regarding consulting engineering services, one thing I would really ask that you keep in mind when going back and checking the data and then looking at forward procedures is the qualification-based selection criteria. When you get to the point where you're talking of bidding engineering services, it really can cause some severe issues. I've seen it happen up in Michigan where they do bid engineering services. You end up getting people that might look qualified on paper but end up not being as qualified. So I really think that if you're going through and looking for procedures in the future, while I agree with what you're saying as far as looking at things, it's that you keep the qualification-based selection process in mind. Thank you.
Is there anyone else present or online that would like to speak? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. Do you accept the motion to adjourn?
No motion to adjourn today.
Okay, didn't think so. All right, thank you everyone for attending.
Thanks, everybody.